Staff Sergeant Savannah Rivera's M249 SAW felt reassuringly solid as her team crossed into terrain that looked like God had dropped a mirror and left the pieces scattered across the landscape. Crystalline rock formations jutted at impossible angles, crevasses appeared without warning, and everywhere, that low-frequency hum that you felt in your teeth more than heard with your ears. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Specialist Jordan Hayes, Savannah's assistant gunner, adjusting the ammunition belts across his shoulders. "Everything gives you the creeps," Savannah replied, scanning the fractured horizon through iron sights. Her rifle optics had died the moment they had entered the wastes, along with every other piece of electronics the team carried. That's when Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves, their mission commander, raised her fist, the signal to halt. Then the world exploded into gunfire. The ambush was perfect. Elevated positions on three sides, interlocking fields of fire, every approach covered. Whoever had set this trap had been watching them, waiting for exactly this moment when the team was most exposed in a narrow passage between crystalline cliffs. Reeves went down in the first volley. Savannah saw her commander drop, saw the blood spreading across her tactical vest, saw her collapse in the open 30 meters ahead with no cover between her and the enemy positions. "Commander down!" someone screamed, but Savannah was already moving. The fractured wastes had swallowed 3 reconnaissance teams in the past 18 months. The terrain itself was hostile, shifting rock, unstable ground, atmospheric conditions that made breathing difficult and thinking harder. And now, they had an enemy force of unknown size using the impossible geography to their advantage. Every tactical manual said attempting a rescue was suicide. Every combat instinct said she'd never reach Reeves alive. Every rule of engagement said, preserve the team above all else. Savannah charged into the kill zone anyway, her M249 SAW roaring defiance. 23 pounds of belt-fed automatic fire that transformed desperation into covering fire. What happened in the next 42 minutes would be classified so deep that most military personnel would never know it occurred. But what couldn't be hidden, what would leak through special operations channels and become whispered legend, was how a 28-year-old staff sergeant from East Los Angeles walked into a geological nightmare, refused to abandon her commander, and fought her way out using tactics that shouldn't have worked against terrain that shouldn't have existed. This is the story of the fractured wastes extraction, and it begins with a woman who believed that impossible was just another word for try harder. 96 hours earlier, the briefing took place in a facility buried so deep underground that the elevators took 3 minutes to reach it. The room had no windows, no identifying marks, just harsh LED lighting and a holographic display showing terrain that made everyone uncomfortable just looking at it. The man at the front introduced himself as Director Chen. No first name, no agency affiliation, just authority. "The fractured wastes," he began, and the holographic display showed a region that appeared to shift and distort even in the imagery. Approximately 40 square miles of geological impossibility where 3 nations' borders converge, and none want to claim responsibility. Created 23 years ago by seismic activity that geologists still can't explain. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves, sitting in the front row with the bearing of someone who'd spent 20 years in special operations, studied the distorted imagery. At 41, she was one of the most respected field commanders in Joint Special Operations Command, with a reputation for bringing her people home. What's the strategic significance? Unknown until recently. The terrain is hostile, unstable, and appears to cause equipment malfunctions through some combination of magnetic anomalies and mineral deposits we don't fully understand. But 3 weeks ago, we detected unusual activity, heat signatures, electronic emissions, evidence of organized human presence. Savannah Rivera, sitting 2 rows back with her disassembled M249 SAW laid out for maintenance, spoke up. "Sir, if equipment malfunctions in there, how'd you detect anything?" "Brief windows when atmospheric conditions allow partial satellite coverage. We've pieced together fragments of intelligence suggesting a facility has been constructed inside the wastes. Purpose unknown, operators unknown, but analysis suggests it may be a black site prison or research facility." Captain Michael Santos, the team's intelligence officer, leaned forward. "Whose facility?" "That's what you're going to find out. We have a narrow insertion window. Weather patterns suggest a 36-hour period of relative stability starting in 4 days. You'll enter, gather intelligence on the facility, and extract before conditions deteriorate." "Relative stability," repeated Sergeant First Class Patricia Kamani, the team's medic, her Kenyan accent making the words sound skeptical. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning the ground probably won't open up beneath you and the magnetic interference will only be severe rather than total." Director Chen pulled up casualty reports. 3 teams have attempted reconnaissance of the wastes over the past 18 months. Team 1 lost with all hands. Team 2 extracted with 3 survivors out of 8, all suffering psychological trauma. Team 3 declared the mission impossible and refused to proceed beyond the outer boundary. "And you're sending us in anyway," Lieutenant Reeves stated flatly. "We're sending you in because you're the best. And because the intelligence value of that facility justifies the risk. If it's what we think it is, a prison holding high-value detainees or a research site developing weapon systems, we need to know." After the briefing, Savannah reassembled her weapon with the kind of focused precision that came from doing it thousands of times. The M249 SAW was her constant companion, belt-fed, capable of sustained automatic fire, and reliable in ways that made her trust it more than most people. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves approached, watching Savannah's methodical work. "Rivera, I've read your file. 3 deployments, distinguished service in Kandahar when your convoy was ambushed. You used that SAW to hold off approximately 40 insurgents while casualties were evacuated. Silver Star." "Yes, ma'am. I did what needed doing." "This mission is going to require a lot of what needs doing. Once we enter the wastes, we're cut off. No communications with command, no air support, no extraction unless we walk ourselves out." Reeves paused. "And the terrain itself is actively hostile. I need to know you're prepared for that." Savannah locked the feed tray cover with a decisive click. "Ma'am, I grew up in East LA during the 90s. I learned early that sometimes you're on your own and the environment wants you dead, and all you have is yourself and the people next to you." "This is just a different neighborhood," Reeves smiled slightly. "I like that perspective. Brief your assistant gunner. We insert in 72 hours. The team consisted of 8 operators. Reeves as mission commander, Santos handling intelligence and tactical planning, Kamani as medic, Specialist Jordan Hayes as Savannah's assistant gunner, a lanky kid from Idaho who could carry ammunition like he was built for it, Master Sergeant Victor Okonkwo on demolitions and heavy weapons, a Nigerian immigrant who'd earned his citizenship through military service and his reputation through expertise, Staff Sergeant Rachel Cohen on communications, though what good that would do in the fractured wastes remained questionable, and Corporal twins Alex and Morgan Chen, no relation to Director Chen, both specialists in hostile terrain operations who moved with the kind of synchronized efficiency that only siblings could achieve. They staged out of a forward operating base in northern Pakistan, where the mountain air was thin and the locals kept their distance. The insertion would be via helicopter to a landing zone 5 kilometers from the wastes' boundary, then movement on foot into terrain that had killed or broken everyone who'd tried to map it. Simple was a word that died the moment they saw the fractured wastes from the air. The terrain looked like reality had glitched. Massive crystalline formations jutted from the earth at angles that defied gravity. The ground itself appeared fractured, cracks and fissures running in geometric patterns that suggested intelligence behind the destruction. And everywhere, that strange prismatic effect, like light was bending in ways it shouldn't. Jesus Christ, Hayes breathed. That's not natural. No shit, Okonkwo replied, checking his demolitions kit. Question is whether it's a natural anomaly or something artificial. The helicopters set them down at 03:15 hours in a narrow valley at the waste's edge. The moment the team disembarked, they felt it. A pressure change that had nothing to do with altitude, a low-frequency vibration that made their gear rattle softly, and an oppressive sense of wrongness that made Savannah's combat instincts scream warnings. Electronics check, Reeves ordered quietly. The results were immediate and total. Night vision, dead. GPS, showing impossible coordinates. Radios, nothing but static. Rifle optics, flickering then failing. They were down to iron sights, paper maps, and mechanical compasses that spun erratically. Welcome to the past, Santos muttered, pulling out an actual paper map and orienteering compass. We're approximately 5 clicks from the intelligence-indicated facility location. But given everything else about this place, assume that's optimistic. Standard patrol formation, Reeves decided. Alex and Morgan on point. Use your terrain expertise. Everyone else, stay alert and stay together. This place already feels hostile. She wasn't wrong. As they crossed the invisible boundary into the fractured wastes proper, Savannah felt reality shift subtly around them. The air grew thick, harder to breathe. Sounds echoed wrong, footsteps seeming to come from the wrong direction, voices bouncing off surfaces that weren't there. And the light bent around the crystalline formations in ways that made judging distances impossible. This is disorienting, Cohen said quietly, her communications equipment completely dead weight in her pack. My inner ear is telling me we're going uphill, but my eyes say we're going down. Trust your instruments when you can. Trust your team when you can't, Reeves replied. Keep moving. 2 hours into the movement, they found the first body. It was fresh, maybe 3 days old, and wore tactical gear similar to theirs but with no identifying patches. The cause of death was immediately apparent. The crystalline rock formation had somehow grown through the body, impaling it from below. The victim's expression was frozen in a moment of confused horror. That's not possible, Kamani said, examining the body. Crystal growth takes years, decades. This happened in seconds. The wastes don't care about what's possible, Alex Chen observed, studying the surrounding terrain. Look at the crystalline formations. Some of them are growing in real time, slowly but visibly. Morgan Chen nodded agreement, being the quieter of the twins. We need to watch where we step. If the ground is unstable enough for rapid crystal growth, we could be standing on a death trap. They continued, moving with extreme caution now. The terrain became increasingly surreal, canyons that twisted in non-Euclidean angles, plateaus that appeared to float slightly above the ground, and everywhere those crystalline formations growing in patterns that suggested structure behind the chaos. 4 hours in, they found the facility. It was built directly into a massive cliff face, concrete and steel integrated with the natural or unnatural rock formations. No visible guards, no external security, just a heavy blast door set into the stone and what appeared to be ventilation systems venting air that shimmered with heat distortion. That's our target, Santos confirmed, checking his map. Intel was accurate for once. Too quiet, Okonkwo observed. A facility in hostile territory should have external security. Maybe they're relying on the terrain to kill anyone who gets close, Hayes suggested. Or maybe they're inside waiting for us, Savannah said, her M249 SAW trained on the blast door. Either way, we need intelligence. Santos, what's the play? Before anyone could answer, the ambush hit. Gunfire erupted from elevated positions they hadn't seen, concealed firing points built into the cliff face itself. The team scattered, seeking cover among the crystalline formations as rounds cracked through the air. "Contact high!" Alex Chen shouted, returning fire. "Multiple positions!" Savannah opened up with her SAW, controlled bursts toward the muzzle flashes. Her tracer rounds lit up the firing positions, giving her teammates something to aim at. Beside her, Hayes was already feeding the next belt, keeping her weapon running. The firefight was brief but intense. The enemy had position and concealment, but Savannah's automatic fire forced them to keep their heads down. After 30 seconds, the shooting stopped as abruptly as it had started. "Status!" Reeves called from behind a crystal formation. "Morgan's hit," Alex reported. "Shoulder wound, through and through." "I'm functional," Morgan insisted, though blood soaked her uniform. Kimani was already moving to treat her. "They probed us," Okonkwo assessed, "tested our response, then withdrew. Professional tactics. Which means they know we're here and they're planning something," Reeves said. "We move on the facility now, before they can reinforce or prepare a better ambush." The blast door was sealed with a mechanical lock system. No electronics to hack, just old-fashioned tumblers and steel. Okonkwo studied it briefly, then pulled out a shaped charge. "Subtle," Cohen commented. "Subtle got shot at," Okonkwo replied, setting the charge. "Now we're being direct." The explosion blew the door off its hinges and sent it crashing inward. The team flowed in immediately, weapons up, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. The interior was surprisingly well maintained, LED lights running on local generators, air conditioning keeping the temperature comfortable, and corridors that looked more like a research facility than a prison. But there was something wrong about it all, like the facility existed slightly out of phase with normal reality. "Spreading out is bad tactics," Reeves decided. "We stay together and clear systematically." "Santos, your intelligence suggested what kind of facility? Detention or research?" "Maybe both." They moved deeper, clearing room after room. Most were empty, but they found evidence of recent occupation. Still warm coffee, computers that had been hastily powered down, documents scattered as if someone had left in a hurry. "They evacuated," Cohen said, "probably when they detected our approach." "Or they're hurting us," Savannah countered, her SAW trained down the corridor. "This feels like—" The floor beneath them exploded. Not an actual explosion. The crystalline rock simply erupted upward with terrifying speed, spears of crystal shooting up through the floor like the facility was being consumed by the geological anomaly outside. The team scattered, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow corridor. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves was caught directly above one of the crystal spears. It punched through her right leg, then her left side, impaling her against the ceiling. She screamed, a sound of pure agony. "Commander!" Santos shouted, but he was already moving, trying to reach her. More crystals erupted, cutting off access. The facility was transforming around them, the fractured wastes, impossible geology overtaking the artificial structure. "Fall back!" Okonkwo ordered. "This whole place is coming down." "We're not leaving her!" Savannah roared, looking desperately for a way to reach Reeves. The lieutenant colonel was impaled 3 meters above the floor, blood streaming down the crystal spear, her face pale with shock and pain. "Rivera, the structural integrity is failing," Alex Chen shouted. "If we don't move now, then you move." "I'm getting her down!" Savannah turned to Okonkwo. "Your demolitions! Can you shatter that crystal?" "Maybe. Small-shaped charge, very precise placement. But I'd have to get directly under her to position it, and the floor is still—" "Do it!" The floor was a maze of crystal spears now, some still growing, others stable. Savannah and Okonkwo navigated through them like an obstacle course, each step carefully placed. Above them, Reeves was fading, her blood loss critical. "Stay with us, ma'am," Savannah called. "We're coming." Okonkwo positioned himself directly beneath Reeves, studying the crystal spear that had impaled her. "This is going to be tight. The charge needs to shatter the crystal without sending shrapnel into her. I need maybe 90 seconds to place it precisely." "You've got 60, Savannah replied, scanning the corridor. More crystals were erupting randomly. The facility's structural supports were groaning under the strain. After that, this whole section collapses. Okonkwo worked with desperate speed, his demolitions expertise letting him shape and position the charge with precision that looked like art. Behind them, the rest of the team was laying down covering fire as enemy combatants appeared. Security forces wearing hazmat-style gear, clearly adapted to operating in the facility's hostile environment. "Savannah, contact rear!" Hayes shouted, sending her ammunition belts forward as her SAW hammered out return fire. She fired short, controlled bursts, suppressing the enemy advance without wasting ammunition. Every round counted now. They were deep in hostile territory, in a facility that was being consumed by impossible geology, trying to save their commander from an injury that should have been fatal. "Charge set," Okonkwo announced. "Fire in the hole." The shaped charge detonated with a sharp crack. The crystal spear shattered exactly as designed, and Reeves dropped. Savannah caught her, taking the impact and cushioning her fall. "I've got you, ma'am." "Stay with me." Reeves's eyes were unfocused, her breathing shallow. The crystal had punched through her femoral artery. She was bleeding out. "Rivera," she gasped, "get the team out. That's an order." "Respectfully, ma'am, shut up and let the medic work." Savannah turned to Kamani, who was already there with her medical kit. "Can you save her?" "I can try, but not here. We need to move to a stable location, and I need at least 5 minutes of uninterrupted work." "Then we find a stable location and buy you 5 minutes." The team formed a defensive perimeter around Kamani as she worked desperately to save Reeves. The facility was collapsing in sections, entire corridors being overtaken by crystal growth, walls cracking, ceilings threatening to cave in, and through it all, the enemy forces kept coming, trying to contain or eliminate the American team. Santos took a round to his vest, knocking him down but not out. Cohen was hit in the leg, still fighting but immobile. The Chen twins moved with synchronized precision, covering each other's movements and angles with the kind of coordination that only family could achieve. "I've got her stabilized," Kamani finally announced, "but she needs immediate evacuation. She's got maybe 2 hours before organ failure." "Then we move now," Savannah said. She turned to Okonkwo and Santos. "We need an exit route, fast." "The way we came is blocked," Santos reported, checking their ingress route. "Crystal growth sealed it off." "Then we find another way. This facility has to have emergency exits." They moved through the collapsing structure, carrying Reeves between them, fighting running battles with enemy security forces who seemed determined to prevent their escape. The fighting was close quarters and desperate, room to room, corridor to corridor, with the facility itself becoming increasingly hostile. "There!" Morgan Chen, despite her wounded shoulder, pointed to a blast door marked with emergency evacuation symbols. "That has to lead out." The door was locked. Okonkwo didn't bother with finesse. He blew it open with explosives. Beyond lay a tunnel, roughly carved through rock, leading upward toward what they hoped was the surface. "Move!" Savannah ordered, providing rear security as her team evacuated through the tunnel. Hayes stayed with her, feeding ammunition as she laid down covering fire against pursuing security forces. The tunnel climbed steeply, eventually opening onto a ledge high on the cliff face. They emerged into late afternoon light, real sunlight, though filtered through the prismatic effects of the fractured wast's atmosphere. "We're out of the facility," Alex Chen assessed, "but we're still in the wastes, at least 3 clicks from the boundary." "And we're being pursued," Savannah noted, looking back at the tunnel entrance where enemy forces would emerge any moment. Extraction, Cohen said suddenly, checking her radio. My radio's working. We're at high enough elevation, the magnetic interference is reduced. I'm getting intermittent signal. Call it in, Reeves gasped from her makeshift stretcher. Emergency extraction. These coordinates. Cohen worked her radio desperately. Any station, this is Viper 7. Emergency extraction needed. We have critical casualties and are under fire. Coordinates. She read off their position. Static. Then a voice. Viper 7, this is Overwatch. Confirm critical casualties? Confirmed. Commanders critical. Multiple team members wounded. We need immediate extraction. Copy. Extraction birds are spinning up. ETA 22 minutes to your position. Can you hold? Savannah looked at her team. 8 operators, now down to 7 functional fighters. Reeves critical, Morgan wounded. Cohen immobile, low on ammunition, enemy forces incoming. Hold for 22 minutes. Affirmative, she said. We can hold. What followed was the longest 22 minutes of Savannah's military career. The enemy forces emerged from the tunnel and immediately engaged. The team had taken a defensive position among the crystalline formations, using the impossible terrain to their advantage for once. Savannah positioned her M249 SAW to cover the primary approach, her fields of fire overlapping with Okonkwo's position. Santos and the Chen twins covered the flanks. Kamani stayed with Reeves, continuously treating her to keep her alive, while Cohen coordinated with extraction forces. The enemy came in waves, professional and coordinated, but they were attacking uphill, across open ground, against a desperate team that had nowhere to retreat. Savannah's SAW became the anchor of the defense, her sustained automatic fire breaking up enemy advances before they could gain momentum. Hayes kept her fed with ammunition, anticipating every reload, keeping the weapon running smoothly despite the harsh conditions. But the ammunition was finite. After 15 minutes, Savannah was down to her last belt, 200 rounds between survival and being overrun. I'm almost dry, she shouted to Santos. Next assault might break through. Then we make sure there's no next assault, Santos replied, his tactical mind working despite his injuries. Okonkwo, how much explosive do you have left? 2 charges. Why? That tunnel they're using. Can you collapse it? Okonkwo studied the approach, calculating angles and structural weakness. Maybe. But I'd have to get close. Very close. 30 meters from the tunnel entrance. I'll cover you, Savannah said immediately. Rivera, you'll be completely exposed. They'll tear you apart. Then I'll have to make them keep their heads down. Move when I start firing. She stood up, lifting her SAW, and opened fire. Not controlled bursts this time, sustained continuous fire that emptied her remaining ammunition in one long, defiant stream. The enemy advance faltered under the onslaught, everyone seeking cover as 750 rounds per minute turned the air into a metal storm. Okonkwo ran. He crossed the distance in seconds, placed his charges with expertise born of years of practice, and armed them. Fire in the hole, he screamed, sprinting back toward the defensive position. Savannah's weapon clicked empty. She'd given everything she had. The charges detonated, bringing down the tunnel entrance in a cascade of rock and crystal. The enemy's primary approach was sealed. Their reinforcements were cut off. The remaining enemy forces, seeing their position suddenly untenable, began withdrawing. The firefight didn't end cleanly. There were still sporadic exchanges of fire, but the main assault broke. Extraction inbound, Cohen announced. 2 minutes. And there they were, 2 Blackhawks coming in low and fast, their approach vectoring directly toward the team's position. Door gunners opened up, suppressing the remaining enemy forces with devastating effect. The helicopters flared for landing, and the team began loading their wounded. Reeves first, still barely conscious. Morgan next, her shoulder wound worse than she'd admitted. Cohen, limping but determined, Santos nursing broken ribs under a shattered vest. Savannah was last to board, her empty SAW cradled in her arms, her eyes scanning the terrain until everyone else was safe. Only when the helicopter began to lift did she allow herself to collapse into a seat, exhaustion finally claiming her. As the fractured wastes fell away beneath them, Reeves, strapped to a stretcher and receiving fluid transfusions, caught Savannah's eye. "You saved my life," she said, voice weak but clear. "Risked everything to get me down. Ma'am, you'd have done the same for any of us." "Maybe, but you're the one who actually did it." Reeves's eyes were struggling to focus. "You held that line, kept us alive. That's what leaders do." "Ma'am, I'm just a staff sergeant with a machine gun." "No," Reeves replied. "You're something more than that. And everyone here knows it." The debriefing took weeks. Savannah sat through countless interviews with intelligence officers, trying to understand what they'd encountered in the fractured wastes. The facility they'd infiltrated was apparently part of an unauthorized research program, multiple nations cooperating in secret to study the geological anomalies and develop weaponized applications. The helmet camera footage showed crystalline formations growing with impossible speed, physics that bent in ways that made scientists uncomfortable, and combat tactics that would be studied for years. Most of it was immediately classified above top secret, but what couldn't be hidden was what Savannah had done. Running into the kill zone when Reeves was impaled, holding the defensive position against overwhelming odds, expending her last ammunition to cover Okonkwo's demolitions run. 8 weeks later, she stood in dress uniform receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, recovered enough to attend with a cane, personally presented the medal. "The fractured wastes extraction," Reeves said quietly as she pinned the medal. "That's what they're calling it. Your name is attached to it forever now. Ma'am, I can live with that. Everyone made it home alive. That's what matters. Not just alive. You brought us home functional, ready to fight another day. That's extraordinary." Reeves paused. "I put in paperwork. You're being promoted to Sergeant First Class, and I've recommended you for advanced leadership training. You have the instincts of a commander, Rivera. The Army needs more leaders like you." Later, when the ceremony ended, Savannah found a quiet moment to clean her M249 SAW. The weapon had saved her life and her team's lives more times than she could count in the fractured wastes. Hayes found her in the armory. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For not leaving the colonel. For holding that line when we were almost overrun. We're a team. That's what teams do, still. What you did. Charging in to save her, fighting with an empty weapon to cover Okonkwo, that was something else." Savannah looked at her weapon, considering. "You know what I learned in the fractured wastes? Terrain doesn't matter. Technology fails. All the advanced gear in the world can die in an instant. But training endures. Determination persists. And the decision to never abandon your people, that works anywhere, against any obstacle, in any conditions." She finished cleaning her SAW, the familiar weight grounding her. "The wastes tried to kill us with impossible geology and overwhelming force," Savannah continued, "but it made one critical mistake. It underestimated soldiers who refused to quit. And that's something no amount of hostile terrain or superior numbers can overcome." 3 months later, Savannah Rivera returned to the field as Sergeant First Class, ready for the next impossible mission. Because that's what she did. That's what they all did. They walked into the hard places and brought each other home. Every single time. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.